Now, look, let's talk about all of this power rubbish. And Steve, I'll deal with you because, you know, I flew into Canberra, as you know, last week, and Lake George was full of water, which was really exciting. And I saw all these dreadful windmills all over the New South Wales countryside, which I think is a blight on the horizon. And, of course, now we've got the woke power company shutting down one of the bigger power stations of New South Wales and, indeed, Australia, all because it works well for woke. Origin Energy, I think, have slipped their moorings on this. This is going to have a big impact. Labor Party, though, are saying, oh, well, you know, it's all the Liberals' fault. But hang on, I think they're protesting their innocence a bit too much, Stephen.
It's absolutely frightening, particularly in Labor Party electorates. I spent a lot of my broadcasting career in the Hunter Valley, and I can only imagine what's going to happen in towns like Singleton and Muswellbrook when the two power stations in Muswellbrook shut down. Eraring's going to have a similar effect. But, you know, it's the messaging that's out there. Here in the ACT, our government, or Canberra City Council, as I like to call it, they try to convince the people here that 100% of our electricity is generated by renewables, but 65% of it comes from across the border. Nearly 90% of it comes from across the border, and 65% of that is produced by coal. So no matter which way you do the maths, the messaging is absolutely false, but people are convinced that this is the way to go. But I did have a friend say to me the other day that, unfortunately, the international community seems to be moving towards this renewable energy nirvana that we seem to have to follow. But, you know, we're going to go through a lot of hardship in the process, and I don't know how we're going to wake up to it.
I don't know, but Bronwyn, I mean, Matt Keane, the New South Wales Treasurer, wants to put in a big battery. Gee, who did that last? Oh, that's right, that stupid South Australian government they voted out 3 or 4 years ago. A big battery. What a great idea. And yet all through Europe, they're now starting to recommission the use of coal and gas. China's building hundreds of coal-fired power stations, generally using our coal, by the way. We sent them so much over the years, they've got it stored. I mean, we are just mad. We're destroying our own sovereignty by actually denying ourselves access to the best things we've got going for us.
Yes, we are. And the fact of the matter is, and we've just got to repeat it and repeat it, the world is run on fossil fuel, and it will for the foreseeable future. That is a matter of fact. Now, what's happening here, and what we've got to understand is there is no energy market. When the governments privatised the generators and poles and wires and the electricity retailers, what happened is all they did was convert what was a state monopoly into a privately owned monopoly. And the fundamental principles of privatisation, when it first started to emerge, and I started to really think it was great, and at one stage in 95 I was the Shadow Minister for Privatisation and wrote the policy for the privatisation of Telstra. But in that we had community service obligations. We said Australians were going to own it. But this was a straight sale to individual companies, some of which are overseas totally owned, some of which are China owned. And so there is no market operating. They have no obligation themselves to say that we have to supply an adequate amount of electricity to keep the lights on, to keep businesses going. That is not part of their job. Their job is to make money for their shareholders because there was nothing put around the sales when it was done. So the net result is, because you've got subsidised by billions of dollars solar and wind power, that's what they put through the system most of the day. But when the real peak periods in the morning and the evening come on, that's when they need the vast production that comes out of those coal-fired power stations. Now, Eraring, which they have just announced they're going to shut down because they don't want to produce the power that comes from that. And the general manager who announced it said, oh, someone will have to come into the market. Really? Who? This battery that's going to be built will supply power for 2 hours. This battery is 700 megawatts, but the power station, which is the biggest in the country that they're shutting down, or biggest black coal-fired, is 2,880 megawatts. So subtract 700 from 2,880 and you see there's a hell of a deficit in the production of power. And that's because of bad policy. And there just has to be an understanding that that coal-fired power station, which they bought pretty cheaply for $1 million, I think, that power station needs to be brought back into a body which will make it function. Now, if that's got to be the state government or indeed the federal government, that's not socialising anything. It's simply acknowledging that turning a state-owned monopoly into a private monopoly does not benefit the people. And there is an obligation for governments to supply electricity.